How do firms gain legitimacy for their new products? And how do customers give legitimacy to the products they buy? These questions are important because without legitimacy, new products can fail to take off. We started out with the idea that technological novelty matters both for gaining and for giving legitimacy, and that firms and customers will emphasize different types of legitimacy depending on the technological novelty.
We took 3 types of legitimacy into account: pragmatic, moral, and cognitive. Pragmatic legitimacy is how something aligns with people's needs or whether it reflects their best interests, such as a phone having long battery life or an activity tracker having a clear and readable display. Moral legitimacy is how something aligns with social values, norms, and style, such as a phone or an activity tracker having a pleasing look or cool design. Cognitive legitimacy is how something aligns with people's mental models and focuses on comprehensibility, such as an activity tracker that synchronizes easily with your phone. Then we took into account 4 stages of technological novelty: fluid, transition, specific, and retro. The fluid stage is where technology is new and innovation is radical. For this stage, we studied smart glasses, created based on new technology and completely new to the market when they first came out. The transition stage is where a dominant design emerges as features stabilize and innovation becomes more incremental. For this stage, we studied activity trackers, where the wristband design has become dominant on the market. The specific stage is where competition turns mostly to reducing cost and improving performance. For this stage, we studied digital radios, a well-established product category based on a well-known technology. The retro stage is where we find mature technologies, which despite having been replaced by new technologies in mainstream markets, stay relevant as niche products. For this stage, we studied vinyl record players, which recently re-emerged as a niche product. So, the questions we asked were, what do firms emphasize to gain legitimacy for their new products? And what do customers emphasize? And how does this behavior vary depending on technological novelty? We studied 14 products from the different stages. A traditional way to study this would have been to conduct a survey, asking firms what it is they do to gain legitimacy for new products, and then conducting an experiment to measure what actual or potential customers care about. But instead, we examined actual behaviors by going straight to the source, straight to what firms and customers are actually putting out there. So for firms, we analyzed descriptions of their new products on their websites. And for customers, we analyzed their reviews of the products on Amazon. We developed lists of keywords and phrases representing each of the 3 types of legitimacy, and systematically searched for these in the text to obtain measures of legitimacy emphasis. This is what we found.
We found that firms emphasize pragmatic legitimacy most in the retro stage of the technology lifecycle and least in the fluid stage. The result for the retro stage makes sense, since the biggest challenge here is to demonstrate performance improvements even if the technology isn't new. The results for the fluid stage was a bit surprising, since products in this stage are based on unproven technology, whose functional performance is still developing, and thus would seem to lack pragmatic legitimacy. Maybe firms think it's just too challenging to prove pragmatic legitimacy for products based on fluid stage technologies, so they sidestep it and emphasize something else. Indeed, we found that firms emphasize moral legitimacy most in the fluid stage and least in the transition stage. This was consistent with our expectations. New technologies naturally lack legitimacy, so firms emphasize how their products are morally right. But in the transition stage, a well-understood dominant design diminishes the need to prove that products are relevant and valuable. In other words, it diminishes the need to seek moral legitimacy. Finally, when it comes to cognitive legitimacy, we found that firms emphasize this most in the fluid stage and least in the specific stage. The high emphasis on cognitive legitimacy in the fluid stage is similar to the high emphasis on moral legitimacy in this stage. New technologies lack legitimacy, and it is important to help people understand them as somehow familiar. But in the specific stage, products are well understood, so there is little need to establish cognitive legitimacy. Now let's turn to customers' emphasis in their Amazon reviews. We found that customers emphasize pragmatic legitimacy least in the retro stage, which makes sense since customers buy products based on retro stage technologies for reasons other than technical features, such as nostalgia. Meanwhile, customers' emphasis on pragmatic legitimacy is highest in the specific stage, where there is strong competition between products within well-defined product categories, and customers are likely to focus on pragmatic aspects, such as price and performance. We expected customers' emphasis on moral legitimacy to vary, depending on technological novelty, but instead, it seems that customers care about moral rightness no matter how novel the technology. Finally, we found that customers' emphasis on cognitive legitimacy is highest in the fluid stage, which makes sense since products based on fluid technologies can be difficult to understand, and lowest in the retro stage, where product categories are very familiar. What does this mean?
First, firms' efforts to seek legitimacy and customers' emphasis on legitimacy for new technology-based products are clearly different. This means that when firms make efforts to gain legitimacy, they need to take into account what customers emphasize. Second, we found that both firms' and customers' emphasis vary, depending on technological novelty. So, technological novelty is an important dimension to keep in mind with respect to legitimacy. Therefore, when firms want to get customers to adopt technology-based products, they should emphasize cognitive legitimacy in the fluid stage, pragmatic legitimacy in the specific stage, and moral legitimacy in all stages.